Hello. A few hints and tips and examples that may help you with your summative essay for the psychosocial module. Don't forget that you need to read the assessment guidance in full, including the full hints and tips sheet for yourself, making notes and underlining important bits, and then thinking through how that relates to what you want to put in your 1,000-word essay. And I appreciate that 1,000 words is not a lot and is actually quite challenging. Therefore, you have to be very focused about what you want to tease out. The hints and tips are in the assessment guidance for this psychosocial module, alongside the PowerPoint and the narrated PowerPoint, and have been since before the module started. You can find them in week 1, in the week by week. You can also find them in assessment help. So make sure that you can navigate, start to find things. I know that there's a lot on the Blackboard site, but actually you're going to have to feel comfortable about finding things for yourself so that you are really getting clear about what's where. Okay, this is the first part of the hints and tips guidance for the module. Talks about the 1,000-word summary using a reflective framework. You'd have been looking at models of reflection and reflective practice in Sarah's CPD module. Clearly, it's not an essay. It is not an essay on reflection. Therefore, using a reflective framework should be a brief element of reflective framework, so you can demonstrate how using aspects of the reflective model or framework is helping you to personally reflect. And you may find the what, so what, now what model is most appropriate, which I think you will have been introduced to as part of Sarah's module. Don't forget the learning outcomes. So there are 3 that this 1,000-word essay needs to show. So it is about you showing that you are appreciating how psychosocial aspects link to patients and their presentation. That you appreciate person-centred care applied to whichever group you have actually looked at for the final summative presentation. So here we've put dementia, mental health, learning disabilities and autism, marginalised, vulnerable groups. Some of the posters in the narrated screencast, examples of posters. I think there was one possibly of homelessness. We've also discussed, and 1 or 2 groups were thinking, I think, of paramedics or paramedic students. So long as you make it clear right at the beginning in your introduction who the patients or the people are that you're focusing on, that is helpful. And the third and very most important learning outcome too is that you are showing respect for others, modelling professionalism. Okay, so these are the learning outcomes and the marking criteria. So note the weighting. All of this was on the original PowerPoint, but now I expect you're getting ready to think about it in a more focused way and think about what it means to you and to what you want to write about. So the psychosocial aspects and interaction between that and people's presentation and what it means is 25%. Person-centred care, its application to care, 25%. Respect for others, 10%, because it's an early and important practice to get you used to using references appropriately so that the citations support the ideas you're bringing forward as well as your own personal beliefs or views or feelings. We've given 15% for references, so you can show that you are beginning to get the hang of how to cite properly and draw on references to support what you're saying. You'll see there's only 5% available for the reflective framework. That is because it should be brief, very, very briefly introduced, what model you're using and why you're using it in the introduction and which elements. And if you don't use the what, so what, now what model, then please don't use all of Driscoll and don't use all of Johns, because you won't have space in a 3,000-word essay, which is an essay perhaps on reflection and analysis of use of a reflective framework. Then there would be more marks available. Organisation of discussion. a lot of marks are given for nice systematic approach so that your ideas make sense and one point in one paragraph leads on to the next point and it joins up. And written communication. Can we understand what you're saying and the ideas you're putting forward? Okay, so what tips? Use a recognised reflective framework. Use it where you can to structure your summary, which is why I'm suggesting what, so what, and now what. I haven't given you the reference here because I'm hoping that you will actually read the rest of the hints and tips and that you will locate that model and draw on it if you find it useful. 5 to 8 key references that have been significant to your learning. So it may be that some of them were the ones that you have used in the poster presentation, and the perhaps the others might be those that didn't directly reflect on the poster and perhaps you didn't dwell on in the presentation, but have been particularly influential to you. Certainly, you have to use a health warning about how many references, how long is a piece of string. Clearly, if you've only got one, that's unlikely to give you the depth that you need and to be able to illustrate every point you want to make. If you've got 15 or 20 for 1,000 words, then you're trying perhaps to cover too much too superficially. Think about all the points and make sure you, when you're drawing on something, you have a source to back it up. Key is the next point down. Show how what you have learnt meets the learning outcomes. And make sure that you have a plan and that you've identified the keywords in the title and learning outcomes. Perhaps you've arranged to meet your personal advisor and share a plan or a piece of the draft work. And don't forget that some of the feedback you'll have had on your draft essay for the CPD module, whilst a different topic area, will perhaps give you ideas about how you're expressing the ideas or how you're using references or how you're organising the points you're saying. Use that to feed forward because there's transferable skills in essay writing that can go from one type of written assessment to another. You may well read over and above what you used for the poster, remembering that then this is about your learning, teasing out, supporting and demonstrating your new knowledge and learning, whether it is cognitive, so it's about knowledge base, whether it's perhaps personal learning, about how you have developed in your understanding or your insight or your awareness of other people's position or particular vulnerabilities. And do make sure that if you want some feedback from your personal advisor, that you don't leave it till the last minute because they're not, I think, normally permitted to comment on a piece of draft work or a plan within 10 days of submission. That's not because we're meanies, but that's because if there are changes to be made, you might be quite panicked if you leave it right till the last minute. Actively read this, think about it, and then think about it in relation as you begin to construct and organise your discussion. Okay, so taking extracts from the hints and tips full guidance. Tip 3, focus, 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 and focus again. In the solar system, choose one planet. On the one planet, choose one forest. In the one forest, choose one Dingley Dell. In the Dingley Dell, choose one tree. And in that one tree, maybe choose a branch or a couple of leaves. In other words, what I'm saying is there might be loads to know about dementia or PTSD or miscarriage or postnatal depression. What you have learnt needs to be very, very focused. It might be just one or two small elements. What you need to be able to do is to explain why in the solar system you chose that planet, why on the planet you chose that forest, and so on. So in other words, you show in your brief introduction that you know that there was quite a lot to absorb, but why, not just what, but why you are focusing on 2 or 3 things that have been particularly useful and very good at illustrating your understanding of person-centred care and psychosocial aspects, or one or two psychosocial aspects. It's better to go in more depth over a smaller area and show that you appreciate that you are learning a small part of a very complex issue than it is to be very superficial and rush all over the place trying to bring in 20 or 30 different points very superficially. You may have come across the TAP model, Topic Action Parameters. There's a link there, and it may be that that remains part of what Sarah will do in her module. But at any rate, what you need to do is you need to have an introduction, which is the beginning, the what, why and how, your terms of what you're doing and why you're doing the particular thing you're doing, with a very, very brief introduction to the model or framework or parts of the model or framework of reflection you're using. And then the middle, which is the meat of the discussion, and then a very short conclusion drawing everything together. Up to 5 or 8-ish key references. Use them to support your discussion. Remember that learning may be about developing insight, sensitivity, awareness, not just cognitive knowledge. But remember to try and use the salient ones and to demonstrate some good contemporary up-to-date sources. Usually we say within the last 5 years. But also, in this case, depending on what you're doing, so let's hypothesize, let's suggest that you're going to be doing something about miscarriage. You may have found very good information on the Miscarriage Association website, or if you're looking at learning disabilities and autism or dementia, there are websites that are to inform the public, to inform service users and carers. Sometimes there is research there, but sometimes it is policy and influencing and political pressure with a small p, and really important because it may encapsulate the views of patients and service users. That has its place, just as has research and statistics. So make sure that your key references are balanced and run the range from service user stroke charitable literature to research and other evidence that gives support in a broad way. Okay, so if you say this is really good and really we should be doing so and this is the way to make things better for X, if there is no substantiation from a source or sources, then that will be a very weak discussion. What you might think yourself when it comes to the theory, in inverted commas, needs to be substantiated. But if, for example, and you'll see in some of the examples that follow, you're then saying, well, this is what I feel, this is what I've learned because of this, then you don't have to substantiate that once you've laid out the stall of some of the sources that have contributed to what I, has learned. Don't fall into the trap of writing 200 or 300 words of how the group decided what you were going to do and how you negotiated and how you set about it and how you planned and rehearsed it and delivered the presentation, because it's about your learning from what you did and you contributed. And many times I've felt very upset on behalf of students who have diligently talked about the group process, but it hasn't enabled them to demonstrate their knowledge about person-centred care and about psychosocial aspects. Okay, so a few myths. This is derived from some feedback and feed forward that I gave to a group in 2017, where I think that they perhaps didn't quite appreciate the robust processes that we go through. So they were saying, oh, you have to use all sorts of long, boring academic words, can't do that. Of course you do need to use a professional vocabulary in your activities and in this essay and in the poster, but you'll see in some of the extracts that follow on future slides in this screencast that you can write in a much more natural style. And if you are in your reading, you're worried about what voice, in other words, the way that you approach writing, you want to check how other people write on articles and narrative pieces, then read. So read not just for content, but read to see how they are conveying their discussion and putting forward their points of view. You may believe that different markers expect different things, that we are biased and prejudiced. There's always one marker, at least, and a moderator. In our marking teams, where we have more than one marker, we work together, we have a consistent team, and we also make sure that we are briefed so that all markers are aware of what the task is about and have been prepared for the marking task. We are marked on our marking by moderators. A moderator will check to see whether we're being fair and consistent, whether the comments mirror the marks that are being given, whether there are differences in how we might approach marking and in this cohort to others, whether we're being different in our approach, and in some cases ask us to amend marks or to rethink or to repackage our comments. So it's really good for us in our development. And then the whole module, the marking and moderation process, is reviewed by an external examiner who is no one to do with this university. They are an academic from another university. We are the only system in the world that has independent external examiners. Okay, we also debrief afterwards, review our practice regularly, and in our module updating and monitoring and in course monitoring, we are scrutinised as to our marking practice and if there are any changes in what we've been doing that might have impacted on the marking. You may also have the myth you can't get a mark, for example, above 70% in your first or any piece of work. Oh, yes, you can. The examples that I've got on the rest of the screencast go up to 90%. And in fact, on other assignments, I've given 98% and in some cases, 100%. I have never given such high marks as I have done to the paramedic courses, whether they're diploma courses or the BSc. So yes, absolutely, and I am not the only one. We use the full range of marks. You may also think academic writing is the same. No. If you are asked to do a very, very objective, for example, a critical appraisal of a piece of research to evaluate the value, trustworthiness and robustness of the research, you'll be writing very differently than you would be writing this piece, which is a critical reflection on your learning. So think about that. Not all academic writing is the same, but clearly you do have to have a balance so that you are able to put the ideas together and demonstrate what has influenced your learning. I can't understand what I'm being asked to do, especially if it's this rather fluffy assessment, you may say. And it's not fair, and you're not telling me, and you're not giving me enough examples, and you're not telling me what to do, and they, i.e. Rosie, should provide clearer instructions. Don't withdraw, don't blame and externalise, because that means that what you're not doing is you're not beginning to think through. There's quite a lot of guidance, and the parameters and the learning outcomes and the marking criteria, I think, should give you clear guidance. You can ask me, you can ask the module organiser, you can ask your personal advisor, talk through your worries and get a bit of guidance. At the end of the day, nobody else can say what you have learnt with regard to some aspect or aspects of psychosocial presentations and how they link together and what you have learnt during your time thinking about person-centred care. So nobody else can write it for you because this is about you and your learning. Okay, characteristics of a good essay. Needs to be structured and focused. I talked about depth earlier, and focus. Case, argument, be thoughtful, be organised. We will probably feel a little bit unwell if we see references to Wikipedia only, and if you are drawing on websites, be careful that they are bona fide ones, so Alzheimer's Society, for example, the Miscarriage Association, the College of Paramedics. These are well-respected websites, whereas Paddy's Guide to Sore Toes perhaps would not be a bona fide website to cite from. A good essay teases out points and explains what you're talking about, why it's important to you, and how it's influenced your learning. In order to drink in the characteristics of a good essay, make sure you lay your hands on the hints and tips, because it will tell you what these things are. And proceeding in future, read the feedback from your formative essay for the CPD and annotations. Make sure you have the Senate scale to hand so that you can see that how our marking criteria link to the Senate scale, because it talks about organisation, it talks about use of references, it talks about the structure of the argument. So there shouldn't be anything that doesn't seem in some way to connect up. But a superficial reading of all the guidance may not help you to have just spent enough time to think it through and see how everything connects and how that connects to how you want to present your ideas. Make sure you read the guidance for the assessment carefully, underlining keywords and concepts. You'd be surprised, or perhaps you wouldn't be, that where sometimes people have written a fantastic essay, it's just not on what we want, not meeting the learning outcomes, and have addressed key concepts, but maybe not to do with what we're asking. Read and keep reading, digging into the topics so that you really know what you want to be saying about your learning, person-centred care, and the aspects of psychosocial elements. Yes, get planned, decide what you're going to cover, also decide what you're not going to cover. And in a good introduction, which you may write last, you explain what you're going to do and why and how, what you're not going to do and why, as well as your stance on using aspects of reflection to illustrate your learning in relation to the outcomes. Prepare for your tutorials and be sure to ask questions in sessions or to pose questions to me that maybe then I can feedback to make sure that everybody learns from them. Okay, first of a series of extracts which have been anonymised and for which consent was sought. This first extract is from an essay with a mark in the 80 to 89% banding, so a really good mark. You can pause this screencast by pressing the pause button or stopping, and you will see that I've put annotations down the side illustrating what things are working and why, and teasing out things a little bit more. See how that makes sense to you, remembering that for the learning outcomes that we've got at the level that we've got, which is level 4, you don't have to have total perfection and be an expert, leading expert of the world, to be able to get a really good high mark. This is level 4, and we're talking about appreciation, we're talking about understanding, we're not talking about comprehensive expertise. This is the reference list from the extract that was on the previous slide of the screencast. Balanced list of resources. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got BBC, so we've got news, absolutely, which was relevant to the topic area. Reflective, Department of Health, Mind, Nice, Rethink, Smith, and some good things to show how to reference from the website, internet, as well as from articles and books. This extract is a different extract from a different student. Again, a good piece of work, and again, you may want to pause the screencast. So we've got a good introduction. So why do you think I've said it's good? And then at the bottom of the page, excellent example of how to analyse and link the theory of the model and the learning you are undertaking. So see what you think and why you think that's a comment and how it might help you to think about your writing. Okay. Here's another extract. Again, this is a third student who's consented to share this. In the earlier part of the essay, the acronyms HVS and CBT and so on were explained, because of course you have to do that before you start to use abbreviations. Again, I've selected it so that you can see some excellent points and the importance of having insight. So when you're talking about your personal learning, appreciation and understanding, insight, self-awareness, awareness of own personal development, these are important things. Again, you might want to pause the screencast so that you can take stock of this and think through how those ways of writing might help or not help you. And this is a second extract from the third student, mark of 90%. Now, I haven't given you the whole essay, and it's deliberate because I don't want people then to feel that they can copy things too much. But again, you can see some good analysis and evaluation and insight. These are important things. I do hope that the examples, guidance and so on is helpful to you. So at some point, even if you're feeling wobbly, you have to go a bit like a child with a bicycle having the stabilisers taken off. You have to make it your own. You have to think through what you feel are the things in your shop window that you want to discuss to illustrate the most important parts of your learning in relation to the learning outcomes. So good luck, and I hope you're not too wobbly and don't fall off and skin your knees.